everyone. My name is Elizabeth Sampson Lee, author of the book Bound and Gagged by the Thin Blue Line, Sexual Assault, Harassment, and the Broken System Sworn to Protect and Serve. This chapter is entitled Wednesday, February 20th, 2013. Shit from all sides. I left work a few hours early to attend the second joint counseling session with Eric at 4 o'clock. I was surprised he had scheduled it on a worthless Wednesday. It seemed more like a manipulative ploy to suggest he was willing to sacrifice. We took our usual spaces on the couch, 2/3 for Eric, 1/3 for me. The counselor began by saying this would be our last session. As I interpreted it, he felt we were too much of a train wreck to work with anymore. He then proceeded to say he had spoken with some of his colleagues about our marriage problems, and together they had made a diagnosis. We collectively decided that Elizabeth has a personality disorder, he said, that she is incapable of distinguishing what is real from what is not, and she will need intensive therapy. Are you fucking kidding me? I thought. My body felt like a spontaneous inferno. Eric had flat out lied about making his suicidal threats and everything else he had done to decimate our marriage, yet I was the one deemed crazy? I glared at Eric and waited for him to fess up to all his lying he had told me he'd done in his sessions, but he said nothing. So I posed a question wrapped in anger and sarcasm to open the door for him to step up and stop this madness. Oh, really? And how long will I need this intensive therapy? The counselor leaned back in his chair and slid into a position of authority. For at least a year, probably more. I thought, okay, Eric, say something. Confess. Tell him the same thing you told me, that you've been lying all along. Nothing. I looked over at Eric, my eyes too fiery to roll, as he elevated his 6.5-foot frame into a victory pose. Instead of admitting to his deception, that liar offered a string of solutions to save the marriage. Now that we know my wife has a personality disorder, we can put all this behind us and move forward. Now that we know my wife has a personality disorder, we can get her the help she needs. Now that we know my wife has a personality disorder, we can have a fresh start. Then he turns to me and said, I will wait for you as long as you go through therapy, no matter how long it takes. I recognized his tone as the one he defaulted to when gaslighting. The counselor looked past me and interjected, Why would you want to wait for her? We're done, were the only words I could muster through my apparent invisibility. Eric then switched to his fake cry voice and piped in, I'm never going to find love again. The counselor didn't miss a chance to reassure him. Yes, Eric, yes, you will. You will find love again. There is someone out there who will love you. I hope so, Eric whined. I had heard enough. Excuse me, I'm sitting right here. I wasn't sure, though, whether either one cared what I had to say. Fight or flight began to seep in. As I surveyed the room for an exit, something struck me as funny. Marriage counselors set up their offices to mimic living rooms because they believe it will bring some kind of magical comfort to couples who can't stand the sight of each other, who now recoil at the voices they once longed to hear, and who realize that the thought-to-be charms are actually heartless manipulations running rampant. Yeah, the soft lighting of that lamp is really going to make a difference fluorescing lighting couldn't. Stroked by the counselor, Eric sat even taller. I'm afraid she's told her kids I'm a bad person and they'll blame everything on me, he said. My head snapped to the right to look at him. I couldn't believe he was dragging my kids into this. I shifted from flight to fight. Really, I said, what the hell do you care? You've chosen to have nothing to do with either of my kids. He continued to look forward at the counselor. didn't even shrink a little bit. I didn't need to say a word to them, I continued. They've formed their own opinions of you. Thank God they weren't around to see how you treated me. You're gonna tell them. I cut him off. My daughter made the effort to send you emails to get acquainted with you, and you never even bothered to respond. Not once. That's what she thinks of you. Seeing his plan backfire to rope in my kids, he got defensive. Well, what do I have in common with a 25-year-old female that lives in New York? Me, I replied. His puffed-out chest receded a bit when he realized he wasn't going to win this battle. Even the counselor wasn't coming to his rescue this time. He then started in with the I love you bullshit to pivot back to the counselor's apparent sweet spot. I couldn't hold back the outburst that was building. No, you don't. You don't even know what love is. If you loved me, you wouldn't sit here and lie. If you loved me, you would have stood up for me after I was sexually assaulted at work. What? The counselor responded as he threw his arms up in the air. Yeah, I replied. I was sexually assaulted in my cubicle at work. I begged for Eric's help, but he said he couldn't help me because he's not a woman. Throughout all our counseling sessions, this was the first moment I could as much as mention the horrific situation of the assault and the aftermath. There had never been room before. I'd always been too busy defending myself, trying to prove I wasn't the person Eric had convinced this guy I was. For the first time, the counselor made a pointed, elevated voice statement to Eric. If someone violates your wife, you defend her. Eric's victory pose finally faltered. Well, what was I supposed to do? They have a chain of command. You go to the sheriff's office, pound your fist on his desk, and demand they do something, he said. The counselor pounded his right fist in his open left hand to illustrate his words. There was no oxygen left in that room. I couldn't stomach sitting on the same piece of furniture with that fraud I was legally bound to. My body went back into flight. I had to get out of there. I got up, said I was done, and held my head high as I walked out the door. The counselor came out into the hallway behind me. Are you okay? I stopped in my tracks and spun around to face him. What do you care? I'm done with this charade. Furious, I ran up the stairs, got into my car, and left before the man I never should have married could follow me and try to kiss me again. Though traffic was my usual focus during these 90-minute drives from the counselor's office, I didn't notice it as I drove home that evening. The sun went down, but my anger didn't. My clenched jaw barely contained my fury, and my neck muscles were so tight that I could hardly turn my head for lane changes. At least I would never have to navigate this route again. About an hour into the drive home, my cell phone rang. I looked at the caller ID to see if it was Eric calling to gloat, but instead saw Blackwell on the screen. You have got to be fucking kidding me, I blurted into the confining air that surrounded me. Why is he calling me at this hour when he knows my workday has already ended? After forcing a deep breath, I broke my own no cell phone while driving rule, turned down the radio I wasn't listening to, and answered on the third ring. Hello. I acted as if I didn't already know it was him calling. Elizabeth? Yeah. Blackwell here. Do you have a minute? I'm driving right now. Can you hold on while I find a place to pull off? I asked. I saw an exit in the near distance. I took the ramp, turned right, and pulled into a gas station parking lot. He began with some cordial banter, but it didn't last long before he dove right in. Denise was sent up to your office to talk to you, but I didn't expect her to handle it the way she did, he said. She was directed to ask you to put something in writing about being satisfied with the outcome of our handling of your situation. But I wasn't satisfied, I told him. He continued, she's good at emergency management and organizational duties, but she does need personnel management training. This was said in a manner meant to justify her behavior. She sure does, I said, as I traced the steering wheel with my right pointer finger to help stay calm. You know, she is your supervisor and has every right to come into your office at any time. Yeah, I know. I was tired of hearing that. I scraped some lint out of a crevice of the car horn with my fingernail and tossed it out the window. The window I had opened to allow frigid air to flow into the car. He then launched into a litany of justifications for the assault itself. It was as though he was reading from the same old checklist, hoping something would stick this time. What Sergeant Coons did to you was an accident. He is socially awkward and doesn't always understand personal space. He gets so busy doing things that he doesn't always realize what he's doing. He didn't mean to offend you. Creepy is not a crime. This time, though, he threw in a new one. It's not like he reached up your skirt. Only because I wasn't wearing a skirt that day, I countered. I held the phone to my left ear and felt it getting warm against my face, despite the frigid February air seeping in through the open window. Then, as though he hadn't heard me, Blackwell launched into a story. Me, the sheriff, and the sergeants, along with our wives, were at a team building gathering recently. Coons was the only one there alone, which was kind of sad. I had my wife strike up a conversation with him and told her to pay attention, to see if she got the creepy vibe. Well, she didn't. I inhaled and held the cold resignation in my lungs. For emphasis, he proudly added, the hair on the back of her neck didn't stand up. I let out the air in one big huff. Are you kidding me? It's highly unlikely Coons would act inappropriately with your police sergeant wife while you're in the room surrounded by the sheriff, other sergeants, and their wives. That's ridiculous, I said. His tone now shifted to official monotone, as it always did when I pushed things too far for his taste. I will tell you again that a letter was placed in Sergeant Coons' file, that we had an all-hands meeting, and that is the extent of it. We have followed appropriate protocols for reprimand. Whatever, I said. I was done. If he wanted to start blaming everything on my attitude, so be it. I leaned my head out the window to gain more space as the passenger compartment closed in on me. I've talked to some of the officers I consider to be leaders, the ones people listen to, he continued. I asked them to tell everyone to stop talking about Sergeant Coons. I brought my head back in so I could speak clearly. Don't expect me to stop. I hate that I will be forever known as the lady who got her crotch grabbed by Coons. I didn't do anything but show up for work one day but he interrupted me, blathering on about our inadequate department software and other unrelated, pointless topics. But I didn't soften to his bullshit, and he couldn't get off the phone fast enough. The lopsided conversation ended with no resolution. I once again felt minimized. I cursed him as I merged back onto I-35, rolled up my window, and turned the volume back up on the radio. I noticed the green exit signs as I passed them. Exit 165, Rock Creek. Exit 169, Pine City. Exit 171, Pine County. Passing this exit, I childishly flipped off the government center, with emphasis on the sheriff's office, and continued driving. Exit 175, Baroon. Exit 180, Mora. Exit 183, Hinckley. I listened to the click, 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 click of my blinker as I drove up the exit 133 ramp, took a right turn, and navigated the few miles home. With barely enough time to set my purse on the counter, I heard my phone ring again. I dug it out of my purse to check caller ID. This time Eric's name showed up. Jesus Christ, it feels like a conspiracy, I thought. When I answered, he claimed he was calling to see if I was okay and to sling the I love yous and I want yous. I cut him off and totally lit him up. I mean, I lost it. At this point, I had nothing left in me but to scream about his lies, deceit, and destruction, and for allowing the counselor to say I had a personality disorder. To that, he had the audacity to say, again, I will support you through your therapy and wait for you. His level of self-satisfaction seemed equal to the volume of my voice. Are you fucking kidding me right now? I screamed. He hung up. I pressed end in relief. Sleep eluded me that night. All night long, I tossed, turned, and silently fumed under blankets on the inflatable mattress on the cold floor of the place I now lived.